Why, hello everyone, what is up? My name is Jason, my pronouns are they, them, and welcome to another video. So, I actually debated whether or not I wanted to wear makeup for this video. I have in previous, I think videos or streams or something like that, I don't wear it very often, but I mean, I decided not to just because I kind of want to make the point that non-binary people can dress and look however they want. You know, I mean, like, your gender expression should not be defined by your gender identity, right? So because I identify as non-binary and because I use they them pronouns and whatever, that doesn't mean that I need to look androgynous, you know, and whatever. So, I mean, that kind of brings us to the video topic. And today I wanted to talk about how I came out as non-binary over 5 years ago. So I came out as non-binary, like, to myself and basically to people around me. If anyone, like the people who have access to my personal Instagram account, and yes, it is private, so you cannot see it. But anyone, you know, in my circle who is following me there, they would have seen that post, you know? And I mean, I didn't make a super huge deal out of it. I was kind of like, I'm non-binary and that's it, I guess. But it was kind of more of a post of like, this is what I've discovered, sort of. It's been well over 5 years at this point, and I wanted to make this video. Hopefully I'm gonna post it on the day that I am filming it, on the first day of June, because it's Pride Month. Happy Pride Month. Hi, gay. Happy Pride Month.
Hi, gay. Happy Pride Month.
But yeah, so I wanted to make this video today specifically because, yeah, I just got the inspiration, like, hey, I need to make this video today. And yeah, I was thinking about it for a little while, and now I think I'm gonna make it. Anyway, so I'm gonna start talking about all of the stuff that I've kind of learned in those 5 years of realizing that I was non-binary, and, you know, kind of just living my life, you know, in these past 5 years. So yeah, this is gonna be relatively... So the first point that I wanted to kind of discuss is that I'm still figuring out what gender means to me, like, in general. So I'm still figuring out what the heck is going on. And I mean, gender in general, if you will. I hope you won't, but gender in general, that's actually kind of difficult to say. Anyway, is kind of difficult to understand, I guess. I mean, if you have it all figured out, let me know for sure. But I mean, I doubt anyone really has it fully figured out, like, what gender means, like, philosophically, existentially, you know what I mean? It's kind of a big topic, and, like, what it specifically means to them. That actually brings me to another point that's a little bit farther down the list that I didn't think I was going to talk about yet, but, I mean, it sounds a little bit pretentious, but gender is something really philosophical, like I was saying, and I think it's why I kind of think about it not super often, to be honest with you. I don't think about it much anymore, but I mean, as the world starts to open up and COVID restrictions are lifting and there's not as much transmission and things like that, there's not as much danger of, like, going outside and socializing, I find myself kind of I find myself paying more attention to the way that I socialize with other people, and kind of just trying to, like, look from the outside in and interpreting how I come off to people, what I do in different situations, that sort of thing. And I'm finding myself noticing more about the way that I interact in terms of I guess, gender norms and like social norms and things like that. And I'm finding that I'm a little bit more of a chameleon than I initially thought, I guess. Um, I remember it was within the first year of my transition. So if you don't know, I'm also trans. So I'm trans and non-binary. That's how I identify. I've gone through transition as an experience, so like physical, social, what medical transition, all that kind of thing. And then it was within the first year of my transition that I realized I'm non-binary. I am non-binary. So it was right around 1 year on testosterone that I realized, like, oh shoot, I'm not actually. I don't actually identify as a man. I identify as non-binary. I am non-binary. So in that time, I just. I mean, I was working as a cashier at a grocery store, and I mean, people were very much coding me as like male, man, whatever, just like young, and well, and I was at the time. Yeah, I was much younger, obviously, 5 years ago, um, 5 to 6 years ago, I guess. But they kind of, I got a lot of, hey boss, hey dude, man, bro, which I freaking hate now. But I mean, I was realizing even back then, that I didn't really like that very much. Um, Something that would have been very, I guess, something that would have been very validating and very like affirming to someone who is actually like a binary trans man, um, was making me uncomfortable, and I didn't really understand why that was. So I mean, at first, I kind of liked it because it was new and it was different and things like that, and people had never really uh, treated me like that before, um, and it was maybe I just thought that I should be affirmed by this. Maybe I was like, this is something. I mean, I guess I was thinking like, this is something that someone like me should be affirmed by. I don't actually know. I don't know how I felt back then. I didn't really examine it too much at the time, but I realized later that it was like, oh no, this actually makes me feel like shit. Like making small talk in this type of way and being treated in this certain type of way where people are coding me as a man. I was like, this is not who I am. This is not me. This doesn't feel right. So it was kind of through that and then other things that I realized that I was non-binary. And so, but like fast forward to today, um, I mean, I definitely come off as more queer, which is great because that's who I am. I come off more authentically for sure. And there are some instances where people are like, hey man, bro, whatever. Not necessarily because I am presenting that to them, because I'm consciously presenting that to them, or because I'm basically like trying to fit into that role, but more so because of their own, biases and whatever what they've experienced. Um, and when they're kind of treating me in that manner, I kind of find my own way to fit into that situation, I guess, which is what we all have to do all the time during socialization, whatever. Um, I think a lot of like social interactions are something that I maybe analyze more than most people, because I've always found social interactions a little bit difficult and something that I have to kind of overanalyze and overinterpret. Maybe because of my trans experience, who knows? Um, but yeah, I mean, I really like overanalyze that type of thing. So, jeez, I've been recording for 10 minutes already. So it's just interesting because I don't try and come off as like some masculine straight dude or whatever. Ugh, that's not me at all. I'm very queer and I'm not masculine, I think. Um, a lot of people say that I'm kind of like, that my aesthetic is sort of like stereotypically masculine, but I mean, I don't agree. I don't know jeans and a t-shirt and Doc Martens, I don't think is super stereotypically masculine. It's kind of neutral to me. But yeah, I mean, people will look at me and they'll form their, little. This sounds condescending. I mean, they'll look at me and interpret like what I'm giving off in terms of gender through the lens of their own experience, right? And so I'm kind of better able, I guess now is what I'm trying to say. I'm better able now to kind of fit my actual self into those social situations where I'm not being perceived correctly in my mind. Where I'm not being perceived as non-binary. I'm not being perceived as someone who doesn't identify as a man. That type of thing. And it's really interesting to through mask mandates and things like that, and just like me wearing a mask in my everyday life, even though I do have a beard and it usually extends, like, if I don't trim it, it extends a little bit farther down than the mask. People sometimes, like, maybe if it's dark, maybe if I'm wearing something that's a little bit more feminine, whatever, they might see me and assume that I'm a woman, which is really cool. I don't know. I like having kind of that dichotomy, and I obviously don't get the other side super often. I'm not perceived as the other binary gender super often. So whenever I get it, I'm like, oh, interesting. So it's just kind of interesting. But like, I don't know. I just definitely feel like I'm treated in different ways based on how people interpret my gender, which kind of sounds obvious, especially to other trans people, because like you've experienced both most likely. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. But yeah, basically like they're interpreting me incorrectly in both cases, I guess, but it's just interesting to experience both. It's interesting to experience the one that I don't get super often. And I don't get like super dysphoric about that. I just think that that's a little bit interesting. I actually get more dysphoric. That brings me to the next point. This is really just like going all over the place. Sorry about that. I hope it has some kind of through line, but like I said, it's going to be rambly. But yeah, so brings me to my next point, that I get a little bit dysphoric. I get actually kind of I've gotten more dysphoric in the past over being misgendered. So being like with. Let me slow down. I've gotten more dysphoric in the past from people using he, him pronouns with me, especially when I've told them these are not the pronouns that I use. I use they, them pronouns, and that's it. And that's how you're going to refer to me. Like, full stop, that's it. If you're not referring to me in that way, then you're wrong. You're doing something incorrect. So, I mean, I kind of have had to assert myself in that way because, I mean, realistically, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm sorry to people who don't want to, like, really assert themselves or are unable to. I understand that experience quite a bit. But you really have to assert that these are your pronouns, and that this is what people will use with you, or else they're doing things wrong, and maybe they should reconsider speaking to you any further. Like, it's that kind of thing, where I have, this is gonna sound really bad, but I don't have any problem cutting people off if they refuse to use my correct pronouns. And yeah, that's just it. I mean, if they're not going to respect me enough as a human being to use the pronouns that I'm telling them I use, that I'm telling them are correct and are the respectful and is the respectful thing to do, I see it as something respectful. I see it as something as, like, respect, right? So if I tell you that these are my pronouns, from now on, you use those pronouns. You can slip up, that's okay. Please try and not slip up as much as you possibly can. And it'll be like a learning experience, obviously, for the person using my new pronouns, but if they're not even willing to acknowledge that these are my pronouns and that I should, and like they should be using them, or yeah, if they outright refuse, like if they ignore it, whatever, I'm like, this is not someone I want to be spending my time with anyway. And I mean, I'm mostly talking about friends, um, yeah, acquaintances, whatever, that sort of thing. And to be completely honest, I have had to assert myself quite a bit in different jobs that I've had. So I think in nearly every single job that I've had, well, I've obviously gotten misgendered, even by coworkers and everything, but I've also gotten into, not fights, but I mean, there have been times where I have had to talk to HR about certain things, or I've had to talk to my manager about certain things, because someone wasn't, was, because one of my coworkers was using, how do I describe this? So, let me just tell you straight up. So, my first job was at a restaurant, and I was a host and busser. And then I also did QA and that kind of thing, like expo and food running. So in that job, I had an issue with two coworkers who just like flat out refused to use, you know, they flat out refused to use my pronouns, like address me in a certain way, that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, I'm talking to my manager, and this is gonna get squashed. So, I mean, one of the people left, so that was what it was. But the other person, after that, knew that they couldn't do that anymore. I mean, like, there were verbal altercations that we had, and that was not okay, obviously. Um, yeah, that was not cool. Very, like, antagonistic in nature. It was not cool. But we squashed that because thankfully my manager was a good person, and he understood that this is how you're supposed to treat me, and this is, and like, it's disrespectful not to, right? And it's especially disrespectful to get into a verbal altercation with your coworker. So that's especially bad. So yeah, so that was my first job. And then my second job, like I said, was a cashier at a grocery store. I also did self-checkout, and then I later did, I was a supervisor. And actually, while I was working as a supervisor at that job, one of my coworkers was talking shit. And this is a person who I thought was my friend. This is a person who I thought I could trust a little bit more than turns out I could. But he basically completely disrespected everything, just like was not a good person in the end, and yeah, was like telling people about personal things in terms of gender, and it was not a good situation. And I went to HR, and they basically did nothing, and I later left that company. It's funny actually, because the like head of HR, when I went into his office, I said I want to give my 2 weeks, and he said, "Oh, why?" And I literally just laughed at him, like I scoffed at him. I was like, "Yeah, because you're not doing your job correctly. Because I don't feel not safe, but like I don't feel respected in this company, and I don't feel good being here." So it's like, yeah. Anyway, the culture of that company was just not good, and that's the place where I was getting a lot of like gendered treatment, if that makes sense, that I wasn't comfortable with. So it was just good for me to leave anyway. And then my third job, I was a barista at a coffee shop, and that was obviously the best time. That was definitely, I mean, that was probably the best job I had, which is great. A lot of queer people. Usually that happens in at barista jobs at coffee shops, so definitely the right place for me to be. But even still, So I had actually come out to the entire team there, and I was like, I'm non-binary, these are my pronouns are they, them. And that was the first job that I ever came out as non-binary at. And so, and I was, where I was like asserting, these are my pronouns, and you need to call me by these pronouns. Um, I didn't do it as much in like an assertive manner in that one. I definitely became more and more assertive, over these 5 years, in terms of people calling me these pronouns and like making it very obvious, like they them, these are my they them, everywhere. Like Jason was about to say my last name, Jason, last name they them, or like they them Jason, they them, like, anyway, I'll tell you what I mean by that later. um but yeah, so that was the first time I ever was like, hey, these are my pronouns, please call me by these pronouns. And even still, there was pushback. So it was like this kid or whatever. And I mean, I know that he didn't really mean anything by it, but so there was this barista who was much younger. I think he was like 17 or something like that. And I mean, I do kind of feel bad for bringing this up as like a thing that I had to, a challenge that I had to deal with in, being non-binary and using not stereotypical gendered pronouns. That's what I'm gonna go with for that. Um, and but yeah, so there was this kid who was just like constantly misgendering me, like in this one example over and over and over again, and I was like, this feels really awful. Like, I physically, it's really hard to describe dysphoria, but it's almost like I physically feel dysphoric sometimes. Like when I get dysphoric, which I get dysphoric by being misgendered, less so now than I used to, but like at that time I was getting super dysphoric by being misgendered because I was so new in people around me using those pronouns, like specifically in a workplace situation. So I mean, some of my friends like knew that I went by they them pronouns, whatever, but I kind of took a while before I kind of like asserted that I wanted to use these pronouns, like, hey, use them for me, these are my only pronouns type of thing. I was like, he, him, and they them, and then nobody used they them basically. But yeah, so it just, it didn't feel good. And then obviously I had to tell my manager, and then she talked to him about it, and like, it didn't become a thing, which was good, whereas at my other jobs it became a thing. But that was kind of like one person who was the outlier. And then I mean, I did have to keep asserting like my pronouns are they them, like at every turn, after that, because like I would correct people, they'd be like, oh shoot, I'm sorry, and then they would misgender me again, and then I would have to correct them, that type of thing. And then on the whiteboard I wrote this really passive aggressive message. It was literally, Jason's pronouns are still, and then still was underlined, they them. So yeah, I became a little bit passive aggressive about it, but it's like I was just so worried, I guess, at first, for like asserting that these are my pronouns, like telling people that these are my pronouns and whatever. I didn't exactly know how people were going to react, and I didn't exactly know how easily people were going to adapt to the pronoun change in their mind. But yeah, I don't regret getting passive aggressive over it, to be honest with you, because I needed to assert myself in that moment. I needed to feel like I was in the right and they were the ones who were messing up, right? So I think that, I mean, as queer people in general, but I think specifically as trans or non-binary, trans slash or non-binary people, we tend to think of ourselves as less, I feel like we get invalidated easily, and that might be controversial, but I mean, where I see like kind of, I guess, people online sometimes, like, it's very much asserting that we are valid and that we are correct in who we are and how we present and all these types of things, because the world wants to invalidate us, right? The world, we live in a society that wants to pretend like we don't exist, or just ignore us as people in a lot of ways, right? So I was definitely feeling quite a bit of that at that time. And I guess over these 5 years, I've like shed a lot of that. And maybe some of it was due to quarantine and the fact that, I was like, a lot of us were really isolated for a long time. And I mean, obviously, I wasn't getting misgendered a lot back then, like over that time, because I just didn't interact with a lot of people. And then, I mean, at that time too, I told the people that I live with, well, my parents, aka, I was like, yeah, these are my pronouns, and please refer to me by these pronouns. And they had already, like, switched pronouns for me, going from she, her to he, him. And, like, that was their main issue with it, I guess. And, like, referring to a single person as they, them, obviously, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so difficult because it's not grammatically correct. But, like, literally we do it all the time. Like, if you don't know the gender of a person, you usually say, like, they did this. So it's like, whatever. If it's not grammatically correct, then be grammatically correct in every instance. Like, if you're really gonna that's something that really bothers me. If you're one of these people who doesn't want to use they them pronouns because it's grammatically incorrect, think about all the times that you are referring to someone in the third person, but it's a singular person, right? And you don't know what gender they are, right? So I mean, I like to give this example. Imagine you're in a coffee shop. Bringing it back to my third job. Imagine you're in a coffee shop and someone left their phone out on the table. And you say, oh, this person left their phone out on the table. I wonder if they're coming back for it. Right? You use they, them in two instances, just like automatically. Right? So if you don't know the gender of a person, you use it automatically most of the time. That driver over there, what are they doing? They're, swerving between lanes. That would be a really big problem. Or like, whatever. But also, the main thing, too, is that if you are so fussed about... if you are more fussed about grammar than you are about respecting another human being, that's a problem. That's a really, really big problem. And that's something that you might need to get over, just, like, internally, right? And, I mean, also don't be a hypocrite. So if you want to claim, I'm not going to use they, them pronouns with people, even though that's what's going to make them happy, that's what's going to make them feel respected, that's what's going to make them feel like you're treating them correctly. Just because of grammar, think about how we don't use proper grammar in a lot of instances. So I don't use the proper whom, right? Do you use whom all the time? Do you say, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good, thanks. You know what? That's incorrect too. So if you want to really fuss about grammar, then why don't you say, I'm doing well, thank you? Or, I have a friend... I actually don't know how to use the proper whom, to be honest with you. But, like, use whom, right? Say, I'm doing well, thank you. Like, if you're really, really fussed about grammar, then don't be a hypocrite about it and go all the way, right? Even if it is at the expense of disrespecting people and taking away some of their autonomy as a human being. Because that's really what you're doing when you're misgendering someone. I told you it'd be a little bit of a rant, this video. So that's something that really, really bothers me. Something else that really bothers me too is ladies and gentlemen. Because, I mean, it sounds formal and everything, but it's so outdated at this point that, like, why are we even using it still? And I especially encounter it, weirdly enough, during YouTube videos. And, like, what? Y'all should know better. Being on the internet, like YouTubers, you should know better to not use that. But I mean, I guess the circles that these people are in, they don't really get a lot of non-binary people calling them out on it. So I did actually leave a comment in one video that I was watching. I was like, oh yeah, you want to be a little bit more engage with the community, how about you don't use ladies and gentlemen? The YouTuber didn't change. He probably didn't even see the comment, to be honest with you. But it didn't get any likes. It didn't get anything. No engagement whatsoever. And I think to this day, this YouTuber and streamer still uses ladies and gentlemen. And I'm like, do you really have to do that? Like, do you... It's so unnecessary. It's like, hi, everyone. I mean, what's my intro? Hi, everyone. What is up? My name is Jason. My pronouns are they, them. So, like, hi, everyone. Hi, all of you people. Like, there's so many ways to not use ladies and gentlemen. It just makes you sound like a prick from, like, the 1920s. I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way. It really, really does. And it's kind of like... It's almost dysphoria-inducing because I'm watching this video... I'm a human being. I'm a person. I'm a viewer, right? But, like, it's almost like this video is specifically not for me to watch. So it's, you know, it's that little conflict. Because it's like, I'm not a lady and I'm not a gentleman. Like, a gentleman. Anyway, it's... Yeah. It's more of that internal conflict. Also known as dysphoria. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and then talk about actually the second point that I had on my list. I've, like, hit quite a few of them, but not in the order that I thought I was going to. And so the next point is that I mostly describe my gender as refusing to conform to stereotypical gender roles. So basically, like, male or female, like, basically I describe it as not conforming to the binary. Oftentimes, like, I'll paint my nails, I'll wear jewelry. I actually have a ring that I wear almost every day that's the non-binary flag colors, which are yellow, I was gonna say blue. Yellow, white, purple, and black. I'm looking over there because I have my non-binary flag right over there. Yeah, so I wear what I wear, I speak how I want, I just do what makes me feel authentically me. But I mean, it sounds really stupid and cliche and whatever, but I mean, it's true. I do what makes me feel good, right? Like, that's how I express my gender, right? And I mean, I do want to stress too that a lot of people, I think, especially cisgender people, sorry, I'm calling y'all out, but you knew it was coming from me. But I mean, I think a lot of cis people, also, cis is not a slur. For all of you people who think that, you are listening to TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, who have told you some incorrect information. Cis or cisgender is not a slur. It just means not trans. That's literally all it means. Cis is not a slur. Okay, let me get that out there. Oh my god. So basically, I think a lot of cisgender people think that gender expression and gender identity are linked, are like inextricably linked, right? So, I mean, you can have someone who identifies as a man who wears makeup. Like, that happens all the time, right? It's not really all that unusual anymore, especially online and stuff like that. Maybe not as much in person if you live in, like, a rural town or whatever. Anyway, that's another topic. But, yeah, like, depending on where you live, it might be super normal to see somebody, you know, presenting masculinely wearing makeup. You know, and in that way they're presenting a little bit more femininely, like stereotypically. I'm talking about purely stereotypes. And so that's, and I mean, it's super common to see people presenting in a way where you interpret their gender as, like, being a woman, and then they're presenting in a more masculine way. Like, it happens all the time. It's very difficult to, like, when I'm talking about this, I think this is worth keeping in. When I'm talking about this, it's kind of difficult for me to kind of, like, bounce around talking about stereotypes versus saying everything correctly where it's like I'm taking into consideration all of the nuance of gender. That's the thing too, is that there's so much nuance in gender, and that it's hard to discuss, and it's even harder to parse what is real, what is fake, like what's basically like societally imposed versus what is gender really. You know what I mean? And it's so interesting because I mean, gender is just an interesting topic in general, which is why I just think it's great to study and everything and whatever. Um, that's another topic again for another day. But yeah, so it's just like it's difficult to talk about, and it's difficult to parse with all of the nuance that comes with gender. It's just so much, and I mean, I guess that's why I think about it kind of often, and I think about all of that kind of stuff. I kind of lost my train of thought there. So anyway, I mostly describe my gender as refusing to conform to stereotypical gender roles, and actually, it's a relatively open way, like open-ended way of looking at my gender identity and who I am in terms of gender, which is on purpose. So it's open-ended on purpose because I mean, I guess by definition, I would be sort of gender fluid because sometimes I feel a bit more masculine and sometimes I feel a little bit more feminine. But to me, I mean, I don't know if that's something that most people experience, but I mean, I feel like a lot of people experience that all the time without needing that specific label of gender fluid. You know what I mean? Because like even cis people probably experience a good amount of gender fluidity where it's like I feel more masculine today, I feel more feminine, but maybe in kind of smaller ways and maybe in ways that they don't necessarily think about all that often. Because I think well, in general, trans and or non-binary people think of gender more often than cis people do. I'm probably right in assuming that. It'd be interesting to get some facts and figures about that. I doubt that like scientific literature exists. But yeah, that would be really interesting actually to ask people about that. So yeah, yeah, that's about it. So yeah, I think of myself in a relatively nebulous way in terms of my gender. I mean, if you want like a concrete label, which I am a fan of labels only to a point where they help you. You know what I mean? So, I mean, let's get into this conversation, I suppose, because we're going there. So, in terms of labels, I tend to label my gender a little bit less just because it's so confusing and up in the air. And I mean, I don't think that for me at least, I'm definitely speaking for myself in this regard and not trying to like broaden my scope to other people, because I'm sure that they think about this in different ways, because gender is so open, it's so personal. That's the thing, it's so personal. That's why like gender roles don't make any sense. Anyway, but for me personally, I don't super like a lot of really specific labels for gender, just because gender is so broad and it's so personal. And I mean, it kind of is changing, not constantly. I mean, I don't think I'd ever be like, oh, I'm super masculine in this on this day and super feminine on this day, or like this hour or whatever. Like, I'm not timing it, right? I'm not tracking when I feel more masculine and when I feel more feminine. I mean, maybe sometimes where it's like, I want to wear this outfit today and this is, you know, giving you a little bit more masculine vibes and then this one is giving you more like feminine vibes, whatever. Or like, I mean, I think that what I'm like, the content I'm consuming somehow affects my like perception of my own gender identity, like on a constant basis. So I mean, I definitely feel and sometimes act more queer when I'm watching something like Drag Race, right? I watch Drag Race all the time. But especially when I'm watching Drag Race with someone who I'm like with someone, like just flat out, because I usually watch Drag Race alone, which sounds sad, but I'm good being alone. So when I'm watching Drag Race with someone, I am like, I feel like I'm much more aware of my queerness, or the fact that I'm coming off a little bit more queer, and I mean kind of more feminine, in a way. And so, I mean, definitely gender is also contextual. So, I mean, I might be feeling that same type of way when I'm by myself, but I mean, I'm not super aware of it because I'm not analyzing my own behavior, and I'm not trying to think of like what's the next thing that I'm gonna say, because I'm not saying anything to anyone. So it's just interesting. It's really, really interesting. Um, that's why I like thinking about gender all the time. It's just fascinating. Um, yeah, I mean, where was I going with this? So labels. And I mean, that's why I don't think labeling my gender is super, um, like, constructive, to be honest, or, like, helps in any way. I mean, I label my gender sort of as, like, gender neutral, sort of. I'm finding that label less and less. I'm finding that label suits me less and less. So, I mean, non-binary is a good enough label for me because it's so broad, and I like that for that. I like it for that reason, right? Because it's very broad, it's very general, it's very much like not a man or a woman. It's non-binary, right? It's not a third gender, but like it's an umbrella term of the whole host of genders that are not binary, that are not just a strict, male and female, masculine and feminine, man and woman binary, right? So that's about it. Um, yeah, like I said, I mean, textbook definition wise, you could call me gender neutral, gender fluid, gender ambiguous. I don't know. Gender ambiguous is kind of cool. But I mean, always non binary. I'm not like demi, where I'm like demi boy or demi girl or whatever, where I'm like, I identify as a binary gender and non binary. I never identify as a binary gender. That is something that's constant, is that I'm always non binary. I need people to understand this. I'm always non binary, and I always use they, them pronouns, no matter how I'm feeling internally, how I'm experiencing gender that day, that minute, that second. Um, and how I'm expressing my gender as well. So, whether I am dressed in what I'm dressed in now, which is a t-shirt and or not sweatpants, but joggers, and I don't know, a little rainbow wrist warmer, which is not on my wrist. It's a little bit farther down my forearm because it's stretched out, to be honest with you, and it doesn't fit my wrist anymore. Because my wrist is too small for it now, which I don't really have that small of wrists. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But, like, one thing that stays constant is that I am always non-binary. And I'm always myself, whatever. But, like, I'm never not non-binary. And I want people to understand that. Like, even though I may have different experiences of my own gender, like depending on the day, depending on, I guess, circumstances, is what I'm realizing. I am still non-binary, and that's not gonna change, right? That's not something, I don't think that I will ever identify as a binary gender, to be honest with you. I don't know if I ever really did. I think that was just kind of something that was imposed. That was just like, how we say, well, if you're cis or straight, you probably don't know, but in the queer community, right, we often say compet. We say compet or compulsory heterosexuality. So it's basically like people perceive you as straight until otherwise proven. So basically, we as a society basically like assume that people are straight or heterosexual until someone tells us differently, right? And I think that most people are guilty of this. I think a lot of queer people have a better sense of like, oh, this person I'm seeing is queer. But I mean, all we have to go by that is our own experiences and our own biases and all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think that there's definitely something to that with in regards to gender as well. So, for sure it's like compulsory cisgender. Yeah. Where you're like compulsory cis. Comp cis, I guess. Compulsory cisgenderism? I don't like that word. Any like genderism is not, no. I hate it. Anyway, yeah, so like comp cis, I definitely felt like that. And also like compulsory binary genders as well is for sure a thing too, where I thought when I was like first starting my transition, my like physical whatever transition, I thought that because I didn't identify as feminine or a girl or a woman, whatever, I didn't identify with that role, and I didn't identify also like with my physical appearance, my body, everything like that. I thought that, well, I mean, I guess the obvious next step was to like, oh, let me go to the other side, right? Let me go from this box to this box. You know what I mean? The box metaphor works really well in this case. But like, let me go from this box to this box because that's the easier option to go with, I suppose. Because I mean, I knew about non-binary identities. I just didn't know. I didn't know at the time how much I identified with it, right? So I definitely had to go through that whole experience of identifying with, or I had to go through the experience of experiencing the world through the lens, not through the lens, what am I trying to say? Experiencing the world in a way where I was stereotypically perceived as male or masculine. To learn that that wasn't me either, I guess. So I mean, I've lived both experiences in a lot of ways. I mean, how old was I when I came out? So I was 18 when I came out as trans, and then I was 19 by the time I started testosterone. And then I was about 20 when I came out as non-binary. So, I mean, I didn't experience, like, I've never experienced being a man or being a woman, is what I think I'm trying to get at. I've just always been who I am, and that's non-binary, right? We've discussed that over and over again. That's been beaten into your head over and over again, basically. Sorry about that. But basically, like, I've experienced the stereotypical treatment of each of the binary genders. That's what I'm trying to say. And neither one of them fits well. Neither one of them works. Neither one of them makes me feel correct. That's the thing that I think I want to stress, is that, like, dysphoria and things like that, you feel incorrect by, I don't know, how your body looks, how you feel in your physical form, or how someone's treating you. You know, if they're if they're using pronouns that you don't feel define you, that don't feel right. I mean, there's just like this. I mean, dysphoria has such a huge range where it's like from discomfort to outward, like, just like really high levels of distress and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can look up what dysphoria means, and like, but it's definitely a range. Like, I want to stress that as well, where, I mean, the dysphoria, we'll get into this now, I guess, too. So the dysphoria I feel now, for sure, is more so discomfort, but it's more about the other person not knowing or not respecting the ways that they should treat me, I guess. And I mean, I think to some people that might be like, oh, you want special treatment, oh, you want this and that and whatever. Like, not really. I mean, all I'm asking for is people to like call me by my correct pronouns and not say like man or dude or whatever. That's about it. That's all I need. I mean, for me to not experience any more dysphoria, to be honest with you, would be so easy if people would just like not assume pronouns and not assume people's gender. And yes, obviously that's difficult for a lot of people and whatever, whatever. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just don't think that I would have a lot of dysphoria if people would just like call me by they them pronouns and not say like man, dude, bro, whatever. Um, because I'm very much good within myself now, within my physical form, within my own identity, within my um, not I guess not so much within my gender expression, just because I've gotten those remarks of yeah, you stereotypically like present masculinely, and it's like just because I have a beard and like wear clothes doesn't mean I'm masculine. Like I don't get it. All of these things are like they could be neutral, but our society just decided to, you know, put people in these two really restrictive boxes that don't really fit most people, I'd say. Um, I mean, you feel free to comment if you're cis and stereotypical gender roles really fit you to a T. But, I mean, a lot of them are very conflicting, and a lot of them don't make a lot of logical sense, and a lot of them are just, like, to reinforce the patriarchy anyway, so, like, what's the deal? What's the tea? Do you really, like, want the patriarchy to exist? If you're a cisgender, straight, white man who has a lot of money, probably, yeah. But if you're Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whatever, then yeah, you probably do. But Bill Gates, I guess, is a bad example. Jeff Bezos, how about that? Like, if you're those people, you probably do want the patriarchy to still exist because you're the ones who are benefiting the most from it. But I doubt those types of people are watching this video, so we'll move on. But yeah, moving on from that point, I mean, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover in this video. I've been recording for almost an hour at this point, 54 minutes and 38 seconds, so that's great. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's about it. At this point, over the 5 years, I know that this has been all over the place and it's been very ranty, but it's difficult to describe gender, as I think I've really, really hammered home quite a bit over and over again. But it's difficult. It's sometimes difficult to just talk about it, but just because it's so weird and nebulous, and gender's just everything and nothing at the same time. It's just very weird. It's very abstract. Is like gender. I want people to realize that is that gender is so abstract, and like kind of philosophical and existential, that like it cannot ever just be defined by two separate, disparate genders, right? It's not binary, right? Gender is not binary, okay? That's why I don't really I don't really agree with the sentiment that gender is dead, but I agree with the sentiment that gender roles are dead. And I mean, they're not quite dead yet, unfortunately. But I definitely think that we could kill them. Definitely. We could for sure try and, I guess, do more to break down our notions of gender. You know, one person at a time. Sounds super cliche and whatever. But I mean, I hope that I hope that this video, you know, I don't know if it clarified anything necessarily or made anything easier to understand, but I mean, I hope that maybe it opened your eyes to, like, if you are cisgender, I hope that it opened your eyes to the experience of gender of one particular non-binary person, not like a whole host of them, not, this is not generalizable in any way, but I mean, I think that some of it you can parse, if you can parse any of it. I think that some of it you can kind of understand that gender is just like such a odd experience for. Oh, I don't want to generalize that either. I don't want to say that gender is an odd experience for most people, because sometimes maybe people are like super comfortable in everything they're doing and they've got it all figured out for their gender, and like that's awesome. That's great. I think that a lot of like binary trans people have it all figured out. But for me, I mean, that's not the case. And that's the thing, is that I don't think I'll ever have it figured out either. Which I think is okay, because gender is such a weird thing. Gender is such a weird thing. But basically, I hope what you've taken from this video is that there are other gendered experiences than being in the binary. And it's really important to understand that, for one, and also respect those people as human beings with their own experiences and their own autonomy, and understand that misgendering is not okay, right? I think that that's really what I want to like bring home. If there's any point to this video, then that's what I would want it to be. Is that like misgendering is never okay. If someone specifically says, "These are my pronouns, refer to me as these pronouns, please," you just need to do it. You just need to do it. You don't have to question it. You don't have to do any of that kind of thing. I mean, if they're like neo-pronouns maybe that you haven't heard of, like Z and here, and there are so many different pronouns that like people can use. I mean, ask them how to use it. Ask them how to use those pronouns, and then move on. Move swiftly on, and just use those pronouns, right? You don't have to get into this whole debate over grammar and usage and whatever. Like, ask them how to use those pronouns, or look it up. I'm sure that there's plenty of resources online that you can look up and see how to use those, and figure it out. Just like give them that respect that every human deserves, of being addressed how they want to be addressed, right? And it really is something where it's like you're respecting that this person has their own life and autonomy. I think autonomy is a really big word in this, because when you misgender someone, you're basically like taking that away from them. And I mean, I know that that sounds kind of far-fetched, I guess. To some people it might sound a little far-fetched, but it really is like you're taking that autonomy away from them, and you're violating their consent. They did not consent to you using the incorrect pronouns. So that's not okay. It's not okay to violate people's consent. Like, let's just get that out there. Like, full stop, that's not okay. So you really are violating a trust, and you're really at the core disrespecting that person. And yeah, it's okay to slip up once in a while if someone hasn't told you their pronouns. And I mean, like, I've been in situations like that before where I have not told people what my correct pronouns are, and then they'll just go ahead and use he him with me. And at that point, I mean, that's kind of on me, because I did not tell them my pronouns, right? So I mean, my friend Kathy, you're probably watching this. You might not be watching till this point because it's a long video, but you probably watched a portion of this video, but like, I didn't tell you that my pronouns were they them, and then that's like how I wanted to be addressed, and like, you use he him with me. But I mean, I didn't tell you that those were my pronouns. Like, I forgot to mention, or I just like neglected to mention, that I'm like out as using they them pronouns 100% of the time. And I knew that you would be like 100% okay with using them. I just didn't feel like having that conversation at the time. We were just like hanging out in the mall or whatever. Like, I just didn't feel like having it. And then you're like, why didn't you... Oh, the ice cream truck is coming by. I don't know if you can hear that. But basically, like, I knew that you would be completely fine with it. And then I ran into someone who was using they them with me, and you got really confused, and I was like, oh yeah, sorry. And you were like punching me and stuff. It was cute. But you were like, why didn't you tell me? I was like, I don't know, I forgot, or like I didn't I didn't feel like doing it or whatever. And no, I absolutely should have told you, like, those are my pronouns. They, them is good. Um, but yeah, sometimes it's just a hassle to like tell every single person like these are my pronouns, they, them, blah blah blah. Which is why I haven't done it with a lot of my family, to be honest with you. I have with my cousins though, and they still misgender me. Anyway, I need to have that conversation with them. That's another thing, is that having that conversation is, this is actually another point that I wanted to touch on. Having that conversation is it's stressful for sure, and it's often, you don't know how it's gonna go all the time, where people like maybe haven't used they them pronouns in the past, or like they don't know how to use them, etc. And it's very like emotionally draining sometimes to have that conversation as well. I know with you it would have been like, hey, I use they them pronouns now, happy, congratulations me, I guess. I don't know. And then you would have been like, okay, cool, Jason, they them. I know that would be with you, Kathy. But for some people, it's, you don't know how they're going to respond, and that's definitely a difficult thing. But the thing is too, it is up to each person individually, like each non-binary person and each binary trans person, blah blah blah, individually, to be like, these are my pronouns, you need to use these pronouns in whatever way that manifests itself, right? So I mean, I came out on Instagram and I was expecting people to like understand that this is my gender and whatever. That maybe wasn't, I was hoping more so that people would understand like, this is my gender and this is, my experience, this is who I am. And I mean, definitely some people saw it, but like not everybody sees those posts. It was definitely like the most roundabout way that I could have gone about it, because at the time I wasn't super ready to like come out in the way that I think is necessary in a lot of ways, to come out to people in your circle, people around you, people that you engage with, whatever. It doesn't have to be a whole coming out process in a lot of ways, so I did want to touch on this as well. I am they them pronouns across the board for almost everyone except for my extended family. So, I mean, my cousins know, but they don't always use they them pronouns, which, like I said, I need to have that conversation with them. Aunts and uncles and things like that, they don't know. But other than that, in my house, with my friends, with even like acquaintances, with my classmates, and then, I mean, once I get a steady job and everything, which I hopefully will have soon, oh my god, they know. Like, that's just something that I will tell people, where I'm like, these are my pronouns, please respect them. You need, and then I'll be a little bit more forceful if they don't. I'll be like, you need to respect my pronouns, or they, them. That's it. Like, and especially in professional settings with like jobs and in class and things like that, it's more of like, we don't have time to have this conversation, and I don't know you well enough to have this conversation. So those individual people, if they have questions about how to use they them pronouns, they need to just look it up themselves. Like, I'm not gonna hold your hand and tell you this is how to use they them pronouns, because we're moving swiftly on, to another topic of discussion in this Zoom call that we call a class, like that we're engaging with. Like, I mean, in a discussion class, I can't just like stop the entire class and be like, hey, my pronouns are they them, you need to use these are all the reasons why. Like, I'm not gonna do that. We don't have time, it's not the right setting, blah blah blah. So people who are in class with me, if they want to talk to me about it afterwards, if they want to have that conversation, whatever, I'm more than willing to have it. It's just that I can't have that in every aspect of my life. So, and especially in professional settings too, like, I'm applying for this research job and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get it. But in that context, I'm going to need to be like, these are my pronouns. And my pronouns are also listed like on everything, basically. Anything that says my name, most likely my pronouns are on that as well. So like the signature of my emails. I even like add an extra like signed Jason, they, them, you know, in parentheses. So like the signatures of my emails, sometimes even before that on my emails, on like my various accounts, on like my email account, it says Jason brackets they them last name. And then like Zoom and WebEx and all that kind of thing, like it says my pronouns. They're hard to miss, honestly. I make them very, very hard to miss because I don't want to stop the flow of conversation and have to be like, hey, my pronouns are they, them. Please use them. And I mean, I've even put my pronouns before my name in my Zoom calls. So like that's how they are now. Like they're in front of my name and at the end of it too. Because sometimes like Zoom cuts it off or whatever, where it's like you can only see the first name of the person and then whatever. But like it's they them, Jason, they them. So I make it very apparent. Like you can literally see my name and my pronouns right there. It's almost like my name is tied to my pronouns. So I really try to make it like that, I guess, where it's like you know my name and you know my pronouns right after that. In a way where they're like, where I feel as though people see them and as inextricably linked, right? Which is exactly what I want. I want you to think of Jason as in myself, they, them, right? Jason, they, them. That's it. And I mean, that's usually how people go about it, where like, if they feel like they have to practice people's pronouns, then they'll say like, I don't know, Alex, they, them. Alex, they, them. Like, repeat it in their head over and over and over again, right? So, that's just an example of a name. But yeah, that's kind of how I do it. So in more professional settings like class, I'm in grad school, by the way, and in jobs and things like that going forward, that's exactly how I'm going to do it. Where these are my pronouns, and if you don't like it, then too bad. You're going to refer to me by these pronouns, and there's not another option. So, yeah. Anyway. But in a nice way, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, in my experience too, people have corrected themselves, which is great, especially in college settings. So as soon as I've put like Jason or they, them, Jason, so like as soon as I've put my pronouns in a very readable, visible place, especially on Zoom calls, people have automatically been like, yeah, these are your pronouns. And I mean, they've started to say like a different pronoun. They started to misgender me, but then been like, oh, sorry, they, them, without me having to say a word, which is great. So I mean, I'm very like secure in the fact that I am non-binary and these are my pronouns, and I'm, I guess, assertive enough. I guess I'm at this point I'm secure enough to be assertive with my pronouns. And I mean, that definitely came with time. If you're not at that point in your transition or your life yet, then that's 100% valid, because like I wasn't at a certain point. But I think that that's the biggest change, is that I'm not I'm not taking anybody's shit about it anymore. You know what I mean? Like I don't have the time nor energy to just deal with people's bullshit around their own biases of gender, right? So if people are perceiving me in a certain way, I know that that's because of them, and I know that that's not because of me. And I mean, gender expression does not equal gender identity, and it doesn't equal someone's internal gender and who they are, right? So no matter what you see and you perceive of who I am and my gender and all that kind of thing, I know who I am better than you do. right? And I think that that's a real big takeaway for people who are cis, where, I mean, you can't just look at someone and know what their gender is, right? That's just an assumption. That's something that your brain made up, basically. That's something that you have formulated based on your own prior experiences, based on your own biases, etc., etc. And I mean, I'm sorry if you don't like that, but that's just kind of how it is, you know? And that's also kind of empowering for people who are non-binary and people who are trans and, you know, it's and queer and etc. Is that other people's perception of you is more on them than it is you. So it's, I don't want to say it's more their problem, but I mean it's based much more on their own biases and experiences than it is of how you're presenting, right? You are what gender you are. I want to tell like any queer people who are here and struggling with that, like, you are the gender you are. That's just what it is. Like, your gender is valid, but I mean, like, legitimately it is. Legitimately, you are the gender that you feel you are. You are 100% valid in your identity and everything. When it comes to other people, when they misgender you, when they miscategorize your gender, etc., that's more a product of their own experience than it is of yours. Their own biases, their own stereotypes that they have in their head, whatever. That is more so them than it is you. And I think that that's a really big thing that I've learned over the years. Over the years, I sound like I'm so old. I'm 25, so I'm not old, but I'm not, you know, super young anymore. But basically, like, it's so much more a product of their experiences, their biases, the stereotypes that they hold, than it is you doing something wrong. Let me just put that out there. You are not wrong in your gender identity, gender presentation, your gender, who you are, any of that. You are not wrong in that. It's other people who need to adjust their biases, right? And maybe not assume gender, right? I mean, I think a lot of us are, quite a few of us are guilty of that, definitely. I mean, even I am, right? Where I've talked for over an hour at this point about all of this, and I still assume people's gender, right? And that's something that's kind of expected in society, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? And so I think that we could all do a little bit better at not assuming people's gender, not assuming people's pronouns, all of that kind of thing. And I mean, the biggest takeaway, I think, is, for cis people specifically, is misgendering is not okay. Don't misgender people. If someone specifically tells you, these are my pronouns, use them. Use the pronouns that are correct. And don't... And also try to avoid... I think that in general, we should just try to avoid gendered language when we're talking to people. So, like, man, sir, oh, hey, ladies, like, whatever. That kind of thing. Like, it's not helping anyone, I don't think. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just my own biases coming into play. That's just my experience, you know, coming into play. So, yeah. Well, if there was any point to the video, then that was it. The last few minutes of it. So, I just want to reiterate that, I mean, after 5 years, I just am who I am, and I present how I want to present, and I just do what makes me happy, to be honest with you. And I mean, I think there are some things that I would want to do in terms of gender expression that are a little bit more to the feminine side that I'm a little bit hesitant to do. But that's something that I'm still working on. So, and it's a process. It really is. I mean, I could make another video about this in another 5 years, and it'll probably be entirely different from this one. I hope so. I hope that I'll be more willing to show that side of myself that's a little less masculine and that's a little bit more stereotypically feminine. I hope so. I really, really do. It's just other people's biases. That's really the issue here. And spending money too, because I don't have a lot of that. So, turns out like if I don't actually like this article of clothing that I want to try out, that's a problem. Because like I've wasted that money. So anyway. Alright, anyway, thank you all very much for watching. If you watched till the end, thank you. Oh my god. This has been a very long video, and I hope that I don't have to edit it too much. It's probably going to be a relatively unedited video. So, anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Happy Pride! It's the first day of Pride. Hopefully when I post this video, I think I'm going to go on and edit it right after this. So, anyway, thank you all very much for watching. I appreciate it quite a bit, and I will see you all in the next one. I'm going to try and post... Am I really going to commit to this? I'm going to do what I can to post 4 times this month. I think that would be really great. Alright, anyway. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.